Good afternoon or evening. Thank you for joining us. Kensington Senior Living has 7 unique communities, 4 located in Virginia, Maryland, and New York, and 3 sister communities located in California. Kensington is truly privileged to support caregivers and professionals from coast to coast. Kensington focuses on relationship-based care, care built on the foundation of our promise to love and care for your family as we do our own. That promise was what initially drew me to become a member of the Kensington family, as my father lived at Kensington for almost 7 years. It is programs such as the one you're attending now that are so important for those of us walking through a caregiver journey to hear from expert professionals on keeping us current with the latest advances in care, management, and treatment of conditions that affect seniors and their families. It is truly remarkable how many of us are living in the sandwich generation. Today, you will gain insight and advice from experts. If you're new to the Zoom platform, this presentation is in webinar format. This means your cameras and microphones will remain off and muted throughout the presentation. We will have live Q&A at the conclusion of the presentations. Each of our attendees today will be receiving a recording of this webinar, along with links to connect you with Kensington and our presenters. Please share with friends and families. At this time, I'd like to introduce Christy Byrne Yates, author and advocate of the Sandwich Generation. Thank you for joining us, Christy.
Thanks, Susan. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for asking.
We have so much in common. All of the presenters, by the way, audience, are in the Sandwich Generation. And today you're going to hear from these women that can help define that, because I think it's much of a broader term than any of us realize. So Christy, I'll let you take it away. Thank you.
Thanks. So I'm delighted to be here and to talk about something that I feel so passionately about. My story is like a lot of people's. I was living my life, raising my kids, getting things done, working full time as a school psychologist, and suddenly realized I needed to help my parents out a lot more. And that sort of snowballed where I'm taking care of them in big ways. My parents both had some form of dementia. My dad had vascular dementia and my mother had Alzheimer's. And in 2015, they both passed away, 7 weeks apart. But that was after a number of years of really caring for them. While they did not live with me, I orchestrated all of the care that they had. And it was a lot. It was a lot for me, for my family. But we came out of it really having grown together as a family, and I learned a lot. And I learned a lot about what I needed to do now as a mother with 2 kids in their teens and heading off into college. And my husband and I looked at each other and thought, there are things we need to do to make sure that our kids have it as good as we did in caring for your parents. Because I really, even though it was hard, I really had it really good. And not everybody does. My parents both had taken the hard work to task. They created a trust. They laid down all of their wants and desires for end of life on documents that I could then follow like a blueprint. And they took care of their money, and I did not have to spend our money on caring for them. They both wanted to go to an assisted living. I found what they were looking for, and that's how it sort of worked for us. This is not the case for everyone. Shortly after my parents died, I went back to work after taking a little time off, and people came out of the woodwork, just wanted to know so many things like, oh, Christy, how did you do this? How did you do that? And I realized there are a lot of people that didn't know what was coming, just like I didn't. So I took time to write a book. So I wrote a book called, right back there, you can see the picture, Building a Legacy of Love, Thriving in the Sandwich Generation. And it's a little bit of memoir, and it's a little bit of all the things I wished I had known before all of this happened. What I did realize is that my parents had laid out a lot of things that made it so much simpler for me. And in talking with other professionals, I learned that that's not always the case, and that when people do take the time to normalize talking about these things, it makes life a little bit easier. But in my research for the book and what I've done since then, is I've learned a lot about the sandwich generation, what makes it unique. And there are a lot of unique things. One of the things I think that's most interesting is that parenting, right? That's part of your sandwich, your children, is not the same as caregiving. And a lot of times people want to conflate the two and say they're just the same, hey, I'm just treating my parents like my toddlers. And that's not the same thing. There are some things that are very common between parenting and caregiving, but they're very different. And when we can look at that, it's really helps us to be better parents because our caregiving can also become a little bit more compassionate. I also realize that self-care is extremely important. And while we hear a lot about that these days, we don't always know how to do it. And there are a lot of things that are important in that process. So I talk a little bit about that in the book. And so now what I'm doing, I've retired from being a school psychologist, and I am using my knowledge of human development and child development to help inform parents in the sandwich generation how to be the best caregivers they can, but also how that can impact their parenting and how to pay attention to that and how the impact on their children might be and how to work around that. So I'm having a lot of interaction with different communities and like Kensington, and I'm really delighted to share that information. I have met some incredible people along the way, and one of them I want to introduce to you right now, and that's Allie Goff, who's an estate planning attorney. And I know that she will tell you a lot about why it's important, and we have connected before, and so I'm delighted to have her here. So hi, Allie.
Hello, how are you? Nice to
Good,
be
good,
here
good,
with you
good.
and with
Yeah.
everyone. I don't know how many people are behind the scenes because we can only see ourselves here. But yeah, so thank you so much for that intro. Like she said, my name is Allie Goff. I'm an estate planning attorney, which means I deal in the legal world of all of this. In my office, we have several attorneys. We service clients all throughout California, and we deal with estate planning, probate, trust administrations, conservatorships, trust management. We really, that's just what our area does. Some attorneys take all sorts of cases, and we're really focused and limited. And by way of background, I am currently living in the sandwich generation myself. I have my in-laws who are nearby. I've got my parents who are nearby. And I have two young kids. My youngest just turned 3 yesterday. Oh, I'm dying. And it's a lot of work. I'm sure all of you have experienced probably something very similar, right? I work full time. I've got my husband who helps out, but he also works with the kids. My oldest is going to kindergarten now. My mother-in-law literally today was like, I broke the toilet. Can you come help? Right. So I'm sort of being bombarded by all the different things in my life that my clients are experiencing. And so one of the things that I actually did with my law firm, because when I started, it was just me. And I would go to people's homes and I was like, I'll take any client and whatever works. And we really changed our business model to serve this sandwich generation. We have leveraged technology in the office so that our clients can fill out intake forms and get us and gather information when their kids are asleep or after the doctor's appointments, right? Because not everyone has time to go drive to the lawyer, sit there for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and drive back. And so I've done what I think I would like as a client is to make it really accessible. Fill out a form online, meet with an attorney on Zoom, come into the office if you need to, right? So we have all these things that we've done to shift to really serve this market because clients in the sandwich generation, they need their own estate plan, right? They probably have minor children or children who are growing up. Their kids need some sort of documentation, powers of attorney, and healthcare directives. Their parents need estate plans, or they might need them updated. And then when their parents pass away, they're usually the ones in charge, and now they have to administer this trust. And so we take our clients from all these different pieces and help them along the way because they're going to need help, 3 or 4 different times in their life. Nobody really wants to see a lawyer. I know, I get it. But we're here to help and make sure that it's as easy as possible and help reduce their stress, take some peace of mind, and give that back to our clients. So that's one of the things I'm really passionate about. And there's one of the reasons I love working with clients in the sandwich generation. And I get them, I am them, right? And so, yeah, so that's a little bit about me. And I would love to bring up Karen. Karen, if you want to join us. Karen, I'm so excited. She's got back from an amazing self-care trip I'm sure she's going to tell you about. And she has a podcast, and I will let her tell you guys all about it.
Perfect. Thanks, Allie. My name is Karen Osborne, and I am a wife. I'm the mom of 2 teenagers. My oldest just started college, and my youngest is a junior in high school. I am a caregiver to my aging parents who live 1.5 miles away from me. And in addition to that, I'm a lawyer like Allie. I work full-time as a trial lawyer for the County of Los Angeles in the Public Defender's Office. And I have a side hustle as a voiceover artist. And so between that and the 2 dogs, my sandwich is really full. Ever since I became a mom, I have been in the sandwich generation, meaning that I've been raising and caring for my own children as I'm helping and assisting my parents as they age. And from the get-go, when my motherhood journey started, my dad had some really critical health issues. 5-6 months after my youngest was born, my dad had to have repeat cardiac bypass surgery. And in recovery, he had a stroke. And so the responsibilities from the beginning were intense. And I went through many, many years kind of feeling like that was just normal. And then fast forward to right before the world shut down with the COVID-19 pandemic. My youngest was 15 and really starting to struggle with anxiety and depression. And at the same time, my mom was having critical issues with spinal stenosis and could hardly move. My dad has pretty much every single healthcare check off on the risk factor list. He's got cardiac issues. He has a stroke history. He's got a cancer history. He's got high blood pressure. Anything and everything pretty much that you could think of was happening. But when Linny, my youngest, became suicidal, it was really only then that I realized I had to do something different. And I ended up, when I got that call from my child's middle school that she had expressed a very specific suicidal plan, I dropped absolutely everything. I left work. I was on a leave of absence for 2.5 years and only went back this last August. And it was during that time that I realized how worn down and how threadbare I was in terms of my ability to manage my sandwich. There were just so many competing responsibilities. And what happened to me is that I withdrew. I disconnected from my friends. I disconnected from my support system. I'm already the kind of person that I'm a do-it-myself kind of gal. And so for me, doing it all is what I had done my entire time as a parent and a caregiver. And these circumstances shifted and changed to where I had to radically accept I couldn't do it all. And so through that process, when I started to re-engage, the world was still shut down. And really the only way to communicate was through something like this, through a screen where you're virtually connecting. And so I ended up taking a bunch of classes online out of desperation to find connection, to find and feel like I wasn't alone. And one of those classes ended up being a podcasting class. And so in January of 2022, I launched my podcast, which is all about parenting, caregiving, juggling life, and reclaiming joy, because I had lost joy. And so my podcast is called Living in the Sandwich Zone. It's all about what we're going to talk about today. What happens to me in the sandwich zone and other people's sandwich zone stories. And I think for me, it has become a place where people can come to hear and know you're not alone in this. You're not alone in this. And I think that through hearing other people's stories, we feel connected and we feel supported and we find resources that can help us do what we need to do to support our sandwich better. So that's me in a nutshell.
I am so impressed with you ladies and a little emotional that you all have had such an incredible journey. I am in the sandwich generation. I think my sandwich is pretty simple. I think I have a little mayo and mustard and maybe a little turkey and my favorite kind of bread, but you guys definitely have pickles, avocado, maybe a little onion, jalapeno. It's complicated, and that's why we're here today to share with the audience how to hopefully dissect the complication out of it and to give our audience some really solid tips and tools to navigate the sandwich generation. And I challenge the entire audience to not overwhelm these presenters with emails because I suspect you're all going to be listening to Karen's podcast. I didn't want her to stop. I was like, I don't need to be a part of this. And Christy, your book is so good. I've read it. I've actually taken pen to paper. And Allie, it's a pleasure to meet you. And everyone needs to know an attorney in their life. Trust me. I've heard horror stories about parents that have not set up. And you go to probate, and I know Allie knows much more about that than me, but I just know it's complicated and it ties everything up and it's very expensive for a long time. So use these resources, our audience, and share this webinar with your friends and family and maybe your parents and kids. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the questions. We have so many questions that were submitted at registration. So I thank everybody for doing that, because that's what we want to do here is we want to gear these presentations towards the questions that you have. And I'm going to go ahead and start with Karen. Any suggestions dealing with guilt?
Oh boy. So if you do tune in and listen to the podcast, you're going to hear a lot of episodes that talk about guilt. Guilt for me is what I call the ever-present thread in my tapestry of parenting and caregiving. Because I've been really hard on myself. Like I said, I'm a do-it-all myself kind of person, and I'm also a perfectionist. And that perfectionism, it makes it really hard to relinquish control. And so when things aren't perfect, I do feel a lot of guilt. I feel like I'm letting people down. I think that one of the tensions that I have is that, you know, my kids are teenagers, are kind of up there in age, not like Allie's little itty bitties. And so one of the tensions I have, I think that I'm often weighing, okay, if my parents have a need and my kids are kind of self-sufficient, I feel like I should focus on the parents because that window's closing and I need to maximize the time that I have with my parents and help them as much as I can. And I'm really, really fortunate to have a really wonderful relationship with both of my parents. Not everybody has. In fact, the first guest I had on the podcast had an abusive dad that she was caring for. And so know that no two sandwiches are the same. And I think that there ends up being a lot of feelings of letting people down and guilt. I remember going by my son's room during the pandemic. We were all at home, knocking on the door and saying, "Hey, I'm going up to Nana and Papa's." And having Zach say, "It's like, that's all you ever say to me is you're going to Nana and Papa's." And the shower of guilt of just like feeling I had just let him down. It's really hard. So my key is that one of the classes I took was a self-compassion for caregivers class online. And there are so many resources online. That's one of the things about the pandemic, that we have a flurry of things to go to. And that self-compassion class, really, I think I had to learn to let go. I had to learn to release the guilt and just stop and say, you know what, this is really hard. And I'm doing the best that I can in the moment. It's really hard and I'm doing the best I can. And that is, I think, that what has helped me release a lot of my guilt. So that's what I'd say.
Boy, that's a really good thing for everybody to know, and much easier said than done. But if you can take anything away, you are doing the best you can, and it's challenging. You're not the only one, too. Christy or Allie, do you have anything to add?
Well, I mean, Karen, I think we've talked before, and I feel like it's really, it is important to, for sure, have that practice, that self-care and that self-compassion. So you're dead on, I think. And I do feel like, guilt is something that is to pay attention to only in not to shame ourselves and beat up on ourselves, but to say what's going on here. And there may be something to tease out, but mostly it's, we really have to honor, we're trying to do everything we can. And it forces us sometimes in the sandwich generation to set priorities in a way we might not have had to in another life, right? And that's, I think, where taking the time to think of those things is important. But self-compassion. Yeah, right on.
I actually love what you both said about you're doing the best you can and prioritizing and juggling. And I picture these balls up in the air and a parent's dropping, you got to swoop in, pick that one up, and then a kid needs you and you got to swoop in. So it really is a juggling act. And I think the better we can just know that we're prioritizing, we're doing the best we can.
Mm-hmm.
Allie, what legal issues should I be concerned about for my parents as they age?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. We get a lot of family members who are coming to us either because their parents are declining in their cognitive abilities, or they've declined so far past them that we have fewer options. And so one things I would say to the audience is really pay attention to your parents and looking for how are they doing mentally, but also are you notice mail piling up? Are they, are notices coming? You can actually check the county records and see if their property taxes are being paid in a timely manner. Keep track of them being able to remember certain things, right? Because often what we find, at least in my office, is parents are really, really good at hiding, especially if there's two of them, right? One will cover for the other, and you won't find out that the other one has memory issues or that they've lost the ability to make decisions. And so really staying on top of them, not like hovering necessarily, but pay attention to them, and getting some legal documents in place, powers of attorney for finance, healthcare directive, ideally a trust if you're in California, a will, looking at their beneficiary accounts. One of the other legal issues that we sometimes see is elder abuse. And so really staying on top of caregivers. Most elder abuse tends to be family members, quite frankly. It's usually not outside parties, but they get those weird phone calls. They're wiring money places. There's the internet now. So there's so many different things. And so really my best advice is just stay present with your family members, see how you can support, see how you can maybe find them a resource that they trust. Maybe you don't go to the lawyer with them, but you send them to a lawyer so they can have a really safe conversation about, in the future, who would you want to manage your finances? So
That's good advice. I can speak because I've had that experience, but I think it's really good to be aware but not push in, because my mother desperately wants to save her, what she does, she wants to save her independence. And when I'm a little bit like Karen, I jump right in and figure out how I'm going to swim later. And when I do that, she's just like, no, but if I'm just kind of tiptoeing around and looking at her phone and she has, 40 voicemails not listened to and text messages. And I think of all those scams, and that's super scary too, for sure. And, so I'm going to go ahead and Christy, how do I help my children? This is such a good question. How do I help my children interact with their grandmother who has dementia?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we've talked about this a little bit, but sandwich generation, there are a million sandwiches on the menu, right? As we've said. And you may have a family where your children see your parent or in-law, your older aging folks, often or not a lot. And so if it's been often, then there are ways that they may be a little bit more familiar. But for those times when maybe you're visiting and you don't, your kids haven't developed that kind of really close relationship with an aging family member, it's important to prep your kids. It's important to let them know in age appropriate language what is going on with grandma or grandpa. And when I say age appropriate, I mean, for an older child who's, late teens, a young adult, you can be pretty clear about what the diagnosis means. This is how it shows up. Grandma's going to forget your name, and here's how you might interact with her. Here's what's happening. And, you can be a little bit more clinical. But, for a young child, it might be something like, here's kind of what it's like for grandma. Do you ever sometimes feel a little fuzzy, like you're not sure what's going on? And there's something going on with grandma where sometimes she just feels a little fuzzy and she can't remember something. Doesn't mean she doesn't love you if she doesn't remember your name. Just say it again. Just tell her. Or you can walk in and you can say, "Hi, grandma, it's me." And you can say your name. Find activities that your children at any age could do with your parent. So really prepping them for some things they can do with the aging person. So it could be something as simple as tic-tac-toe if they can still play that. Or I'll tell you one thing that people in memory care facilities really respond really well to, and they may not be in an assisted living, right? You may have them in your home. But older folks really, and all of us do, resonate with music. So find some music from their generation, things they used to listen to. And that could be a great lesson for your kid to hear, for my parents, it was swing music, right? That's what they listened to. I keep thinking when I end up in an assisted living, right? Are my grandchildren going to be listening to AC/DC with me or something? Am I going to be having, rock and roll going on? I don't know. But, they could listen to that. With my parents. They could talk about, they could look at photo albums together and look at things. And, what do you remember? And we don't want to quiz. We don't want to say, "Hey, what do you remember?" like as a thing. But grandma, tell me about something. Tell me about what happened in this picture. What's going on? Do you remember? Or what can you tell me about it? Or, and just having conversations that are, and go with it. Go with those conversations. I think it's really important not to quiz people who have memory issues. Like I always use the phrase connection rather than correction. We want to connect with them. If they say something that doesn't make sense and isn't accurate, we can just say, "Tell me more about that." A lot of times older folks, and this is something you can prepare your kids for, they might say, "Oh, I want to see my brother Bobby." And that Bobby passed away 5 years ago. And you can say, "Oh, Bobby, tell me more about Bobby." Just connect. You don't have to correct. And so those are the things you want to prepare for your kids. There's a great resource, and that is alsauthors.com, and they have a gazillion books, and many of them are children's books, and that can help kids too understand what's going on. So I think prepping them is really important, because you don't want them to be scared and you don't want them to shy away. And I would never force a child to do something they don't want to do, but I would definitely prep them so they know and they don't feel lost themselves in what's going on.
One of my podcast guests talked about really focusing on the 5 senses when you're dealing with and keep it really present.
Yeah.
What you see, what you feel, what you smell, what you
For
feel.
sure.
The music thing, I think, comes in there with the senses too. And I think that's a good way to keep it simple for people to connect with dementia.
And I love the age appropriateness, maybe go in and draw a picture together with crayons, maybe someone plays a musical instrument, bring your guitar, or your flute or whatever, or drums. I love that. Karen, I'm worried about this is a great question too. I'm worried about my husband getting sandwiched. Who knows what kind of sandwich that is? It's probably complicated, probably a panini. He seems to get the raw end of the deal.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that often gets lost in living in the sandwich zone, the whole sandwich thing, is that we often lose sight and focus on the connection of our relationships. with a partner or a spouse.
Mhm.
And I know for me, it was hard because at the same time, when I was describing everything that was happening in our family, our child not wanting to live anymore, my parents having significant health issues, my husband, his mom, out of state, needed to be placed into care. And so Matt is the last of 5 siblings, and he's out of state in California. His family's in Washington state, and he was trying to navigate those things. And I think for me, what happened was there was this kind of like compartmentalization where it was like, all right, you tend to your family, I'm going to tend to mine family. We're going to try to hold it down and keep everything, you know, noses above water in the home front. And there really was not space made for actually connecting. And I think that's what I get from that question. It's like when your attention is so fractured and split among so many responsibilities, I think it is a risk and a fear that you're going to lose that and then have to deal with the fallout of that as well. So I think for me, what it really distills down to is communication with your partner. And sometimes it's just saying what you need affirmatively. I love when people intuit my needs and just know what I need before I say them. But the reality is that's just not realistic. People don't know what you're going through. And so the more that you can assertively say, this is what I need in this moment, and then show up for your partner in a way to say, what do you need in this moment? Sometimes it's like, you just need an ear to vent. I just need to tell you how frustrated I am about mom and dad and all this stuff going on. And you just need someone to listen, not to fix it, not to strategize with you, just to listen. So when my husband's a fixer, and a lot of guys are. And so for me, if I just need the ear, I have to lay the foundation for that and say, okay, I need you not to say anything. I need you not, to give me advice here. I just need you to listen. And so I think it is really checking in and really asking your partner what they need so that they can feel tended to, and you can actually connect in a way that is the most supportive and useful and soothing for your partner in the moment. And that will create, I think, the intimacy and connection and bond.
That's
So
really
I
important.
have
Allie?
I have some suggestions too. Right. So my husband is the primary caregiver for our children. So he runs around like the crazy person with all the appointments and that sort of thing. And he also can take care of the house, right? Because I'm working. And so one of the things that we figured out is tapping out, essentially going, I will say to him, do you need to tap out right now? Is now a time for you to go literally leave the house? Go somewhere else, go to the bedroom, go take a break, go drive and get groceries. Like, I think sometimes it takes the other person, the other partner, or someone else in your life to see like things aren't going well, and to be like, to be the person to be that stand and say, it doesn't seem like you're okay right now. Would you like to take a break? And almost always, and he's done it for me too. He's like, you've yelled a lot recently. Are you okay? And I was like, nope, I'm not. Thank you so much. I'm going to go take a 5-minute walk. I will come back refreshed, right? But sometimes it takes that other person to see you and go, I got this. I got the kids. I got the thing. Do you want to take a break? Right? Sometimes it's a longer break. Sometimes it's a weekend away, but sometimes it's just 5 minutes. And I think sometimes we need that other person to tell us, time for a break.
Allie, that is awesome, and I love that, and it's also that's the conversation you can have when things are going well. Like, hey, let's have this plan. You know what I mean? But that's absolutely, I love the
Code words.
tapping out. That's great. And then just being intentional. Like what you're talking about, Karen. I mean, just being intentional, and we have to be intentional with our self-care, but it's also important to be intentional with our if we're in a partnership, what's our partner care like? What's that like? How's our spouse doing? And making time for that, because it is critical. This is tough on a marriage. It's tough on a partnership. So.
And Christy, I think what you just said is so important, to have the conversation when things are good, when you're not in
Yes.
crisis, because
Right.
when you're in crisis, you know, like if you're really maxed out and you're like, I'm tapping out, it can feel to your partner like you were quitting
Yeah.
and abandoning and
Yeah.
you know, saving yourself. And so I
Or
think
judgmental, like you weren't doing it right, so I have to come in, you know. It's just
right.
tough.
And I think having these conversations, not only just with your partner, but about like what we're talking about with parents, about estate planning. I'm
Yeah.
married to a probate lawyer, you know, so we have all those conversations too. And I think that the more that we normalize
Yeah.
death and aging and the pressure that
Right.
it puts on families, and we start talking about it, I think that that's so important. I think that that's really like, that's why it's important to me to podcast, because the more that we start talking about it, you're destigmatizing it, you're just
Right.
normalizing it, you're making it where everybody can talk about these hard things
Right.
and find ways to navigate through these kind of treacherous waters.
Right. Right.
Boy, did
Yeah.
I learn something today, is to have the conversation when everything's kind of calm, because I learned something from Allie about tapping out, and I'm like, do you need a timeout? When you said you need a timeout, you know, it's like, I'm not a child. I don't need you to tell me what to do. And so
Right.
I love that, you know, go ahead and give yourself some time.
Yeah.
Tap out.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so much better than timeout.
Yeah.
Allie, this question is for you. What are the basic legal documents I need for myself and my family members?
Yeah, so I mentioned them a little bit, a few of them, but really briefly. So for each person who is alive, right, really should have a healthcare directive, a power of attorney at a minimum, right? Those are our two, one's for health and one's for wealth, one's for money. If we've got aging parents, chances are they have a house, they've probably got some retirement assets, a pension, those sorts of things. We start to look for more advanced planning. A will says where their stuff goes and who's in charge. And then, of course, a trust, which would avoid the whole crazy hassle that is the probate court. Karen must know because her husband's down in, oh my God, that county is like years, literally will take years to get the money into the hands of the family members. And so there's some extra documents we want in there, right? Making sure the deed's in there, certification of trust, assignment of property. Most of these binders are probably about this thick, right? If you're looking at a binder and it's about this thick, please call the lawyer immediately because you're probably missing some key elements to those plans. But yeah, healthcare, power of attorney, trust, will. That's like your bare minimum for. And by the way, your kids will sometimes, when they turn 18, they need healthcare directives and powers of attorney. Because in case you didn't know this, the second they turn 18, you as the parent have no legal ability to do anything for them or talk to anyone on their behalf at all, unless you have healthcare directive, power of attorney, right? Parents, same thing. You can't act on their behalf if they do not give you permission, and you need written permission. So,
and I will tell you this, that became really important to me, having had a child with mental health issues. When my son was getting ready to go to college, Zach had turned 18. And because I had gone through the mental health system with our younger child, I said, Zach, before you leave for college, it's really important for me to have these releases of information, this, you know, advanced healthcare directives, so that if something happens to you when you're at college, that I can come in and advocate for you and find out what's happening with your doctors. And he was really understanding about it. And I said, I'm not trying to pierce your privacy. It's really just a safety
emergency.
in case, because, you know, our kids, even though, you know, the law deems them adults at 18, they don't have that life experience about what the systems require and how to navigate those systems. So as parents, it's one of those things that think about doing with your kids as they start to age out and get to college age, to get those documents and keep them on file at home in the event that something happens. And the other thing we did is we did an advanced psychiatric directive as well. And that was specifically because of what we'd all been through in the event. And mental health is such a big issue. One of the things I didn't say on the checklist is that my dad is also bipolar. And so there are also significant mental health issues that make the waters much more murky. And so the more you can plan ahead and have these avenues for clear communication with practitioners and providers, the better off you are.
Yeah.
I am so thrilled there's more awareness on mental health and more resources available and taking the stigma out of it. Let's just be clear, we all have challenges in that, arena. And for everybody that was feverishly trying to write down the 4 things Ali said, you will receive a copy of the webinar, and you will also receive information on how to contact her as well. Christy, this is a great question as well. I have a child with a severe disability, and now I'm caring for my parents. I'm on overload. Help.
Yeah. Right. That's another one of those sandwiches, right? And
Deep breaths.
yeah. And Allie could probably speak to this as well, because, if you have a child with a severe disability who is probably going to be under your care for some time, you may want to set up some legal protections for them as well. Wouldn't you say so, Allie? Yeah. So
Yeah.
same sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I think that in those cases, again, one of the things I would recommend to anyone is, so we all are in California right now, and California has a number of agencies throughout the state. They're called Caregiver Resource Centers. So you can just Google that, and there'll be one in somewhere within your vicinity. There are 8 throughout the state, but other states have councils on aging or caregiver resource centers, and connect with something that can connect you with resources that can help you with caring for your parents. But there are also agencies in every state that help with raising kids that have special needs. And so contacting agencies or connecting, I was a school psychologist. I was a point person for a lot of parents and helping connect them to services throughout the city, county, and state that might be able to support them. And when you find those, you then find people who can serve as advocates, who can give you information that you don't know. There's a lot to know in all of this. And so you can't be expected to know everything. And if you're already on overload, I would say find resources in your community where you can turn to for really good information. There's nothing wrong with Googling something. There's nothing wrong with looking it up, but that's not well vetted in terms of the big picture. You really want to talk to someone who has a solid background in the information you're trying to find, so that you feel safe and you can do what you need to do to help your child. But I think really that overload can be mitigated by building your team, by finding resources in your community, but also in your family and friendship areas. How can you start to rely on other people? Karen touched on this in another answer about doing it all herself, right? And so some of us get this, we have this playlist running through our head, and one of the favorite songs in my head is I Must Do Everything Myself, right? And I have to now, slide in some other songs that are like, hey, you can rely on other people too. Like I really have to coach myself through that sometimes, because like many people, I can do it all and I can't do it all. So when I start to realize I can rely on other people, wow, that's just a lot of burden off my shoulders. So that's one of the things I think that can also help with overload. And sometimes it's just being able to say, you know what? Life really stinks today and I need to tell somebody about it. Find those people you can say that to and who aren't going to judge you. But also start relying on other people that can help you, because they are there, and you might have to interview and sort through, but it's a great effort, and there are people that can help you with some of these things. So overload is something we can start to manage a little bit.
The visual I have on that is you're juggling all these balls, and someone with a severe disability is a 10-pound weight. The others are maybe 5-pound weight that you can kind of hold. And so I'm lucky I have 3 children, and they've all struggled with certain things at times during their life. And you're just lucky when, they do it at different times.
Right.
Can't imagine the overload of having it all fall at once.
Right. It's true. I used to think of it as, did you ever see those people that spin plates, on the sticks, and then suddenly a couple plates start to crash to the ground? And that's how I felt. And I really had to get some other people in here to help me spin those plates. And that was all I needed.
Or maybe get some plastic. Karen, I have a question here for you. What
Sure.
qualities do you look for in people when reaching out for support about sandwich generation stress?
Ooh, I think this one is really important to me because I have recognized that I go to certain people for certain things and really have to be very specific about who I'm reaching out to. Because there's some people you reach out to in your circle who you know are just going to be like the righteously indignant, oh, that's awful, and really just champion you. And there's some people that you know are like the feather pillow that will just envelop you with just warm, tender love and care. And some you go to because you know they're good strategists and you know they're going to give you the advice and solid sort of, pros and cons. And I think you have to exercise discernment in knowing what you need in the moment and knowing the population of people you surround yourself with, and then go to those specific people who can give you what you need in the moment. Because I know, so my parents are both Jamaican, and my mom particularly, when I tell her anything that, for example, with Lenny, that is about Lenny, she goes into grandma mode. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And it's like, then I feel like I have to care for my mom
Right.
and care for my child. And it's like trying to soothe both of them, but I'm left without any comfort zone. And so I know I don't go to my mom for that kind of thing. I mean, I may go to my mom about something else, and she's the perfect person for that. But yeah, I think it's about discernment, because you really want to find, and I think Christy said it a minute ago, you want to find the people that you can go to and confide in, who will meet you where you're at without judgment, that will just be able, I talk about this a lot too on the podcast, this concept of holding space. You want people who are able to sit with you in the muck. And I'm not talking about just someone who's going to bring you down further and wallow and lament the whole situation, but to give you the space that you need to be able to valve what you're holding and let it out and know that someone is with you there. And I think that's really been important to me. That whole thing, the penny dropped about holding space, especially with Lenny, because there wasn't anything I could say that was going to make it better when Lenny was critically suicidal. It was about being there and validating those emotions that, oh my God, you don't want to live anymore. And that's just so hard. That's horrific. And really just sitting there with that, knowing I couldn't fix it. So that, I think, that thing about holding space, find the people who can do that for you. That's what I'd say.
Allie and Christy and Karen, what do you think about? I feel like in my life, I have certain people I kind of lean on for different things. Sometimes I need someone to say, yeah, kick me in the butt, or, or sometimes I need people to say, that's just got to be really hard. I'm empathetic. I'm sorry. How can I support? Allie, what do you think about that? Do you have different people in your life you kind of lean on for different?
Yeah, for sure. Yes. Right. We have an agreement. I have a friend group, and one of our agreements is we never say it's going to be okay. Nobody wants to hear that.
That's the worst.
Right?
I'm sorry, that's just the worst.
Oh, it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine.
You don't get it.
I
It's
will,
not going to be okay. Yeah.
I will pull out your hair if you tell me that, because I need you to tell me that super sucks. And I go, it does super suck. All right, let's have a different conversation. But yeah, sometimes you need to go to an expert, right? And get an answer to a legal problem, or to an issue you're dealing with a school or with a care facility or a doctor, right? You need to go somewhere and get an answer. And sometimes you need to go and be heard, right? So I think it's important. The lawyers in my office are really good at hearing people, but we're also very expensive. So maybe not the best place to go and be heard necessarily. You might want to, find a place where it's safe to get the things off your chest. So when you come to see the lawyer or the therapist, you have a little more clarity and you're ready to have the conversation in a space that is really productive. And so just being strategic. Sometimes you just come and cry in the lawyer's office. No judgment, by the way. That happens, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's a lot of crying in my office because these are emotional issues. But just show up and find the people that that you trust, right? That will just go, we got you. I got virtual hug. I got you.
Yeah.
And to have that conversation. Go ahead, Christy.
Oh, no, I was going to say it is really important to find those folks. And I'll just share, I do have a caregiver support group that I run on Zoom, and it's weekly, and it is run very much like a self-help sort of format. In other words, no one's giving anyone else advice. There's not a curriculum because you never know what people are going to walk in with. It's really a place to come, and as you're saying, Karen, holding space, that's exactly what this is. And so people can show up and say, today I'm really angry at that I'm in this situation. I'm full of resentment today. Here's what happened and here's how I feel. And no one is saying you shouldn't feel that way, or here's what you should do to fix that. They're saying, yep, I get that, been there.
That sucks.
And yeah, that sucks. But it's amazing how transformation happens in a group like that, because sometimes you just need a space to be able to share. And so finding those kinds of things can be really helpful. And I love that, Allie, that you have that agreement about you can't say that everything's going to be okay. But and also to your point, listen, I am a big believer in therapy. I'm a mental health professional. I really feel like therapy has been really helpful. I've also benefited from coaching at times, coaching being very future focused. And there were times when that was really what I needed, someone who could help me see the next step for myself. And then times when I needed to reflect and do something a little bit deeper. So I say, look for what you need, and there are resources. And I think one of the fortunate things that came out of the pandemic was our ability to do Zoom and things like that. And so in my caregiver support group, no, not one person lives within, well, I don't know, a couple thousand miles from me. They're all over the place. So, and even other countries. So it's really finding a group. So you can do that now in technology, but it's important to find support where you can get it.
Christy, I think it would be helpful for you to articulate what's the difference between therapy and coaching, because you're a caregiver.
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful.
Well, for sure. So therapy tends to be much more looking inward and also looking backward and looking at what's going on and maybe where some things may have stemmed from, some behaviors you have, where that might come from, depending on what you're in therapy for. And there's lots of different types of therapy. I tend to be somebody who's very cognitive behavioral, right? So we have a thought, then we have a feeling, and then we have a behavior. And sometimes we need to change that because the behavior, maybe the thought that we're having is not accurate. And so the feelings we have are maybe misguided. And so our behaviors are not great. So we need to kind of fix all that a little bit, tweak it a bit. But that's a specific kind of therapy, right? Coaching tends to be, we're not, and Allie, I know you know coaching, it's not looking backwards and saying, where did all that come from? It's like, where are you right now? Where is it you want to go? Projecting into the future and looking at behaviors and ways that you can keep moving forward. So it's very future focused and action oriented in that regard. So I don't know, you would add anything, Allie, on coaching?
Yeah, no, it's very like, what do I have control over and what am I going to do about it?
Right.
It is very much like not about anyone else.
Yeah.
It is about me and what I can control.
And that can be helpful in sandwich generation because you may be overwhelmed and you need someone who might be able to say, let's see what we can untangle. And not like, oh, that happened when you were 25 and that's why now at 45 you feel this way, but like, oh, you needed a ride for your child for soccer, but you got a call to go to the emergency room. Let's think about so this might come up again. What are we going to do? What are some things you can put into place? You're going to have a little go bag for ER, you're going to have to, so you can think through some different things. So that's what I would say, Karen. Does that make sense?
I think that's super helpful.
Yeah.
And to our audience, I can't believe we've run out of time. If you have questions You can respond to the email that you will get, and I will do my best to get the questions answered from these wonderful three coaches. And again, Christy, please put your information about your caregiver support group, and I'll get that from you, and your book and the podcast and the legal. But to the audience today, thank you for joining us. Have a great evening if you're on the East Coast, and a wonderful afternoon if you're on the West Coast. And thank you so much for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much.